Hello friends, and welcome back to Daily Movie Recaps, a new movie recapped every single day. Today we will recap an American drama film, Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, released in 2015. Spoilers up ahead, so watch out and enjoy the recap. At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to the main protagonist, Greg. He is in conflict with himself about how to tell a story, and starts to think about ways to describe it. He tries to narrate the story using different scenarios, further explaining that life has both the best and worst moments. After this, he proceeds to narrate his own senior year of high school. Greg mentions that he destroyed his life and made a film so bad it literally killed someone. In the next scene, we get to know that Greg is somewhat awkward, has low self-esteem, and is self-conscious. He always tries to avoid getting bullied and wants to complete high school without getting into trouble, so he makes friends despite having no interest in them at all. He pretends to get along with everyone and earn their trust accordingly. He wants to lay low and be away from the high school drama. The school's canteen is the most crowded area, and because of this, he never has his lunch there. Instead, he eats in the office of his history teacher, Mr. McCarthy, along with his friend Earl, where they both watch some films during their free time. One day, Greg's parents are discussing his future studies. Just then, they share some bad news that his old friend Rachel has been diagnosed with leukemia. His parents then let him know that Rachel's mother wants him to hang out with her. Greg's mother asks him to call her and give her company, but he refuses instantly and says Rachel is not his friend. He shows his strong disinterest to not be with her, but after his mother insists a lot, he reluctantly agrees. On the first call, Rachel rejects his company, but since he has been ordered to spend time with her, he goes to her home to convince her. There, Greg shamelessly begs her to hang out with him. He also mentions that he's not there because he wants to be, but because his mother would be angry if he didn't show. In the end, Rachel allows him into her room. In this way, the duo start connecting together and their friendship begins. As they are talking, Greg gets a message from Earl, who is his co-worker and closest friend. We get to know that Earl is compassionate and quick to read situations. Even though Earl and Greg are from different backgrounds, they became close because of their common interest in classic cinema. They liked movies so much that they started to make their own movies. Despite being passionate about movies, they are sometimes so naive that they don't even know the meaning of leukemia. So, one day Greg asks the history teacher about it. The teacher answers that it's a blood cancer, and Greg accidentally tells him that Rachel has it. Some students overhear him, and he feels extremely guilty. Hence, he apologizes to Rachel for being so careless with his words. Rachel, in turn, confesses that having to explain her health to others is troublesome. Seeing Rachel distraught, Greg tries to lift up her mood. He tells her to act as if she is dying if someone asks her about the illness. Greg then childishly starts acting like a dying person, but suddenly realizes how immature and stupid he looked while doing so. As soon as he realizes his mistake, he asks her for forgiveness. Instead of being angry, Rachel also starts acting like Greg did a moment ago, and the two of them burst into laughter. As time goes by, they become quite close. They start to go to the library together and even the cafeteria. Rumors spread about them being lovers. In the next scene, Rachel states that the hardest part about having cancer is once she faces her death, her mother will be all alone by herself. She mentions that her parents actually don't get along and dislike each other. Rachel asks Greg about the high school groups that he has categorized and which one she falls into. Greg jokingly answers with boring Jewish senior girls, subgroup 2A. But Greg asks her to appreciate his honesty. Then Greg starts mentioning his lonely life and how he doesn't fit in the society. A moved Rachel asks him not to think so low of himself. Rachel and Greg go for lunch together, and Rachel takes him to sit with her friends. While Rachel is gone for a moment, her friends asks if Greg is being friendly to Rachel just because she has cancer. Greg nervously denies it. He makes some gross jokes and tries to divert the situation by making fun of his friends. But Madison, who is Greg's crush, finds it rude. Greg immediately panics and runs out. He starts thinking that the image he maintained for the last 8 years by staying invisible is gone. He then meets Earl, who is eating cookies that he got from one of his friends. Greg also takes a bite and starts discussing his current situation with Rachel. After a while, they start to feel high and find out that the cookies were in fact edibles. While Greg and Earl are high, they go to Rachel's home. They confess to Rachel that they are high due to the cookies by making up a different story. The innocent Rachel just laughs it off. Earl and Rachel talk a bit, and she comes to know about the movies that they have made together. While Rachel is under chemotherapy, she starts losing her hair and starts to go bald. Greg tries to cheer her up, but unfortunately worsens the situation. Tired of messing every situation up, he just gives her a film that he made so he can lift up her mood. One day, while Greg and Earl were on a set, Madison appears out of nowhere and tells Greg to make a film about Rachel because she is fond of them. She convinces Greg by saying it will be the most incredible moment for Rachel to watch her own movie. Greg doesn't want to do it, but he unconsciously agrees to do so. Later, Greg visits Rachel in the hospital, and they talk about getting admissions into college for Greg. Being an introvert, Greg does not want to apply for colleges, but anyhow ends up doing so because of Rachel's emotional blackmail of cancer. Rachel is getting weaker day by day and is admitted to the hospital where Greg is by her side all the time. Greg gets an offer from Pittsburgh State. However, instead of getting excited about it, he starts thinking of Rachel and decides to start the movie he promised to make about her. With his friend Earl, he begins working on the movie and starts looking for inspiration for it. They both talk to different people to get ideas. Greg talks with his father too regarding the movie. Later, he starts the process of movie making where he includes all Rachel's favorite people like her mother, friends, Earl, and himself. Greg devotes himself to making the movie brilliant, thinking that it would bring happiness to Rachel and somehow would be a positivity to her. Earl also tries his best to help Greg. Because Greg is focused on making the movie, he totally ignores his school life and does not focus on it, which leads him to missing all his assignments and schoolwork. However, Greg is fine with this. In the next scene, Greg and Rachel talk about how the high school is totally into the medieval prom. Greg says the school is looking like a castle because of the prom, but he is not interested in attending it. He also says he has no one to go with. Greg then tries to convince Rachel to be his prom date, but she denies it and suggests going with Madison instead. With the conversation going on, Rachel asks Greg about the movie he is making and when he plans on completing it. Greg gets surprised at how she knows about it, to which Rachel reveals that Earl was the one who disclosed the secret. Rachel is really sad about her health and is getting weaker by the day. The chemotherapy sessions are doing more harm than good to her health, so she starts to think of quitting treatment in the middle. When Greg finds out about this, he yells at Rachel and chastises her decision to give up on her life. An emotional Greg then tries to convince her not to think negatively, but despite the convincing, an adamant Rachel stands by her decision and the two get into an argument. They both say bitter things to each other and Rachel tells Greg to go away. Cut to the next scene, we see that later, after the discussion with Rachel, Greg goes to Earl, showing his disappointment that he could not keep a secret about the movie, and he gets into a fight with him too. This is Greg's first ever fight with his only friend Earl. After getting into fights with the only two friends he has, Greg becomes all alone. Greg does not focus on his studies either, and his teacher and parents start getting worried about him. One day, when Greg is in his room with his laptop, his mom enters and starts talking about Rachel again. She informs him that Rachel is in her last stage and was just admitted to the hospital. She again insists Greg should go and meet her. However, a furious Greg tells his mother that he is not going to do anything she says. The next day, when Greg is about to have his lunch in the canteen, Madison approaches him about the movie and suggests he complete it as quickly as possible because Rachel is in critical condition. In the meantime, he gets into a fight with another friend from school. The fight and his poor academics get him expelled. As he walks through the school, Madison proposes to him for the prom. On prom day, instead of going with Madison, Greg rushes to the hospital to meet Rachel there. There, he realizes that Rachel is dying. Rachel seems very weak and sad. Greg puts a corsage on Rachel's wrist and pretends that they are ready for prom. He then prepares the movie he and Earl made for Rachel, and they start watching it together. Rachel is very silent during the whole movie. The film is very heart-touching, and it breaks down Rachel into tears. Shortly after the movie ends, Rachel falls into a coma, and after 10 hours of being unconscious, she passes away. In the next scene after the death of Rachel, Rachel's mom, Greg, and Earl all grieve together. The demise of their close friend makes Greg and Earl close once again. Keeping Rachel in his thoughts, Greg sneaks into her room and finds a letter written by Rachel. The card is for Greg's college, stating that he could not do well in his academics because of her, and how capable he is in everything, including his studies. The card also mentions that Greg could take away the belongings that he likes from Rachel's room. He then goes through Rachel's stuff and finds everything interesting and realizes he has missed all these things while he was with Rachel. He finds numerous carvings in Rachel's book that depict the moments spent with Earl and himself. This shows that Rachel still cared about him even when they were not speaking with one another. An emotional Greg then leaves, taking his favorite pillow from Rachel's room along with one of the books she carved. Later, Greg writes his story about Rachel and posts it to the college along with the movie he made for Rachel. And the warning, the last person who saw this immediately went into a coma and passed away. Please leave a like or comment to let us know which movie you like to watch next. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications. This way you'll never miss any movie recap again. Thanks for watching and stay safe.